Hello folks, Alex here. This is Alex Unabridged, and today I've got my wrap up for Trans Girl April. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, second reading event of the month for me, Trans Girl April. I thought I might have overfaced myself a little in April with two events and my own stuff, but actually I've done pretty damn well with getting through stuff. I am on a reading roll at the moment and I'm loving every minute of it. So yes, Trans Girl April was an event that was organised by the lovely Kevvie over at Kevvie, also Kevvie was working along with WIllow from Books and Bow, so I will link to both of their channels in the description. And the idea of this is, of course, to read a variety of books from a diverse cast of authors, essentially, trans authors. Fantastic event, really enjoyed this. I've found so many cracking books through this that I probably wouldn't have come to otherwise. So let's crack on with them, shall we, and crack on with the prompts. Prompt 0, which I neglected to do when I did my TBR, I just realised, is to denounce fascism and pledge your support of trans people across social media. So I shall do that now. I do indeed denounce fascism in all of its various guises, be they subtle or overt. And I pledge my support, my solidarity, my love for all of my trans sisters, trans brothers, and my non-binary and genderqueer siblings. Love to you all and support to you all. So into the book prompts then. So the first prompt was to read a work of fiction by a trans woman, and for this I picked Femmes and Notorious Liars by Cheng, Thom, and I had this as an audiobook, which was very well read. I've just realised I've forgotten the narrator's name. I will pop it up on screen. So this is a story. This is the story of a young trans girl who runs away from home and finds a true family. Is as part of a larger-than-life group of trans femmes who live in a mysterious place known only as the Street of Miracles. But when one of their number is brutally murdered, she joins her sisters in forming a vigilante gang called the Lipstick Lacerators to fight back. Things go terribly wrong. And she has to find the truth about herself and, stop her own kind of violence. It's a coming-of-age story. It speaks strongly to themes of identity, resilience, trauma. It celebrates the power of trans women, trans people, queer femininity, and it's angry, and it should be. It's righteous anger. It's a really interesting read, actually. It's a really interesting style. It's got such imaginative world building. It's kind of magic realism. I think it's probably the best thing I can best genre I could put it in. The most appropriate one. It's got wonderfully lyrical prose. It's poetic. It really is. There's almost poetry sections in it, and it's a very empowering piece. It hit me. It hit me quite hard. It was very well read, but it's one where I think I will probably go and buy the hard copy, because I want to be able to flick back and look at it, and I kind of want to see how it's set out as well in some respects, because, as I say, because of its kind of poetic quality. And I want to go back and I want to really kind of pore over it and not analyse it, but just take it in better than I think I can with an audiobook. Yeah, this is a 5 out of 5 for me. This was outstanding. I absolutely loved listening to this. It's broken up really nicely into kind of quite short chapters, and there are some little kind of almost like interlude sort of chapters, like notes from my journal, and kind of sort of a ballad of a pocket knife. There's some really just evocative, descriptive work in there as well, in terms of feelings, and things that I relate to, you know, despite, you know, not, you know, the things in it not being anywhere close to my experience with, you know, in any way, shape or form, let alone just the trans experience that's described. But there were things in it that really like hit home to me, and like really I could relate to. Certainly in terms of like the rage, the anger being described as kind of a swarm of bees under the skin. I've used that myself as a metaphor to how I experience kind of a low level kind of anger. You know, that it's kind of it's always there, and it's always kind of bubbling. It's always kind of buzzing. But it very rarely becomes anything else these days. It very rarely kind of, you know, breaks out into, you know, kind of an angry swarm. But back when I was much younger, it did. And it's yeah, just the amount of really beautifully written descriptions and ways that Cheng Thom talks about the kind of the feelings, the emotion of the characters in this is beautiful. It's a beautifully written book. So yes, a great one to start my my reading off with for the event. The next prompt, which was a non-fiction by a trans woman, I didn't finish this. This was Transitional by Munro Bergdorf. This was an audiobook, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with it whatsoever. I would have to say that up front. I really liked it, but I quite quickly realised that this was one that I really wanted to take notes on, because there's some of the stuff that she's talking about in this is very relatable to me, and it's something where I was like, I know I need to sit with a notebook with this, with a book open, or at least on the very least on the Kindle, and actually take notes and just take my time over it. It's not one that I could give enough attention to in an audiobook format. So I decided to put that one aside, and I will come back to that probably in June, when I do a whole month of LGBTQIA+ reading. Then we're on to genre fiction by a trans woman, and this one was one that I also read for Old School April, and this was the first book in the trilogy of In the Shadow of Extinction by Kelly Warner, which is a kaiju epic. And yes, the first book is The Ring of Fire, it's called, and we follow a number of characters present at the beginning of the apocalypse, essentially, as earthquakes and volcanoes erupt, destroying huge areas of the planet, and giant monstrous creatures climb out of the volcanoes and from underneath the earth and from out of the sea to cause havoc and take over the planet, basically. I really enjoyed this one. This is a 4 out of 5 for me. I will definitely read the second two books. I do have them in a compendium, so I've already got them. But yeah, this is great. Kelly Warner's style is really straightforward. Really, it's kind of plain English, if you like. You know, sparing with words. It's not at all purple prose. But it's really well done. It's very evocative. You can really imagine the creatures. You can imagine the destruction, and the character work is good as well. The characters are interesting, and we follow lots of different characters, and you're never quite sure like who's going to survive and who isn't, which is always something I like. But yeah, so far we've in the first book we've come across, I think, 3 different sorts of monster. Whether we'll get more in the other books, I don't know, but I definitely want to find out. They're really really imaginative monsters, and they're pretty gross as well. Some of them, the breeders in particular. So yeah, I thoroughly recommend that if you want something fun and fast paced, and with, you know, devastation and apocalypse and big ass monsters. Okay, on to prompt number 4, and this is fiction by a trans man, and for this I read Several People Are Typing by Kasulke. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This was bonkers and brilliant. This is I'll say straight up, this is a 5 out of 5. Another one for me. There's a few in here, but this one, I think this one was my favourite of all the stuff that I read for Trans Girl April. It's a guy who's trapped in cyberspace, essentially. Gerald, who is a mid-level employee at an unnamed sort of public relations company, has inadvertently managed to upload himself into the company's internal Slack channels. His consciousness has. His body's still sat at home. And yeah, the sort of the chaos that ensues really with that, but also, I mean, it's not just about Gerald. It's all done through Slack messaging, all these Slack, you know, Slack channels, and so it's about all of his colleagues as well, and you know, it kind of looks at you know, kind of or at least the experience, the ideas of like virtual work from home, sort of contemporary life. It's absurd. There is absurdism in there, most definitely. It's hilarious. It is absolutely, the amount of times I was laughing out loud at it. It's, you know, it looks at relationships, both, you know, romantic and workplace relationships. It's just silly. It's just hilarious. It's very dry in parts. It's a really hard one to talk about without giving too much away, that would, you know, kind of take away from the humour of reading it. All I can say is just give it a crack. It's brilliant. Particularly the bits between Gerald and the Slack bot, like the help bot, just had me in stitches at times. But yeah, absolutely give it a go. It's short and sweet, and I think, you know, that's right, because otherwise the format that it's written in could get old if you went on too long with it. But it works so well. And as I say, it's just bonkers, but it's got stuff to say. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, give it a go. Okay, prompt number 5 was non-fiction by a trans man, and that for that I read Transition: My Quest to a Beard by Bertie, and this is Alex's memoir of his journey of self-discovery and transition, from childhood struggles with gender dysphoria and his decision to begin hormone therapy and gender-affirming surgery. And he shares his experience very honestly, with a lot of vulnerability. He highlights the challenges of transition, you know, the euphoric points of transition, and the support that he gets from his friends and family and supporters online, because he's a YouTuber as well. So yes, it's full of his personal perspectives and insights. So, you know, it looks at his transition very specifically, his experience, but then also kind of a wider insights into the sort of the transition experience for a trans guy. Although he's very clear that you know, what his experience was versus what other trans guys might experience, the sort of the range of experiences, especially when it comes to things like hormones and stuff like that. He's very clear to say that, you know, he experienced this, but not everybody might, that there might be alternative experiences. And, you know, he talks about the importance of self-acceptance as well, and of speaking for yourself, you know, of using your voice and of advocacy. I appreciated this. This was, you know, I've given it a 3.5 out of 5, because 3 felt too low and 4 felt a little bit too high, and that's purely because I think of the writing style. I think for someone, I mean, I think this is potentially targeted more at sort of teenagers, or, you know, and maybe folks sort of in their upper teens, sort of young adults, and, you know, kind of, you know, new adults, I guess you'd say. And yeah, it for me, it wasn't kind of, the writing wasn't always great, but the messages that he you know, what he wanted to say certainly came across. So I think that's why I've kind of kept it just below the 4. But in terms of its content, it's I think it would be extremely useful, extremely helpful for people questioning their gender, and for, you know, wondering what it's like to go through transition as a trans guy. For me, that sort of element is, you know, kind of, it's transition 101 in a lot of respects, and, you know, 15 years into my transition, I kind of don't need that anymore. But for those who aren't there yet, absolutely, this sort of thing, you know, it really needs to be out there. There wasn't a huge amount out there when I was even thinking about transition, and what there was had been written sometimes in the 90s, and so it's very, very different. For me, there's some relatable stuff in what Alex says, and then, you know, not so much in others, because we're coming from different positions. Certainly in terms of the physical transition stuff, there's definitely some relatable stuff, and, you know, he's quite humorous as well with how he talks about it. But in terms of identity-wise, we are different, and so that I can't necessarily relate in that respect. But it's really interesting to read about somebody else's experience, and certainly somebody else's experience who transitioned, you know, kind of 10 years after I did, and is experiencing it through quite a different, you know, in a different world, in a different society, and how we see and how we talk about trans issues. So yeah, I think for youngsters and for people questioning and, you know, or have made the decision to transition and are you know, scared of what that means, I think this could be a really helpful book. And as I say, Alex talks very warmly, very honestly about his experience. So, on to the next one, and we've got genre fiction by a trans man. And for that, I read To Strip the Flesh by Toda. So this is manga. This is the story of, or like, it's several stories, but the main story, the title story, is about a young trans guy, Chiaki Ogawa. He's never doubted that he's a boy, but he's kind of bound by his mother's dying wish to be a good daughter to his ailing father. But the burden becomes too great for him, and he sets out to kind of remake himself in his own image, and discovers more than just kind of his own liberation from transition. He also finds understanding from the people who matter most, and it's a beautifully written story. This actually, it's a really warm take on one person's transition. And it's not, I like the art style. It's a nice warm art style, and it's got some lovely characters in it, and it's, you know, some really kind of understanding and human characters in it. Again, it's, you know, it's got lots of stuff that I can relate to in it. But it's got, you know, there's one friend in it. I'm trying to find his name at the moment. But his kind of his best friend. There's an event in here, or there's something that happens, and how his friend handles it, kind of made me roll a little tear, just in terms of how compassionate and how wonderful a thing that was for a friend to do. And yeah, it's really, I'd say it's really warm, really human in its writing. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. And yeah, the other stories in it are equally, you know, kind of interesting. They're quite bizarre, some of them. There's one like about a kind of a sort of a short 2-page thing, which is just about kind of I think they're called sunfish. It's just really quite random stuff. The rest of the collection, quite quick and easy to read. And there's also quite a nice little conversation in the back with Toda and another artist, which I appreciate reading as well, in terms of like looking at what Toda's inspiration was and why he wrote the stories in here. So yeah, definitely worth the read. I gave this a 4 out of 5. It was a very quick read, but it's definitely worth it. Okay, on to prompt number 7, which was unfortunately the one that I didn't get to at all, which was fiction by a non-binary or genderqueer author, and I had wanted to read Nettle Black by Nat Reeve, but yeah, I just ran out of time basically. But that has gone back on the list for part of my June's Pride reading as well, because I do really want to read that one. Prompt number 8 is non-fiction by a non-binary or genderqueer author, and for that I read Fine, a comic about gender by Rhea Ewing, and this explores the complexities of gender identity and the experience of coming out as non-binary, and it looks at Ewing's interviews with a whole range of people about what is gender, and you know how gender factors in to things like relationships and sense of self, and all of that kind of stuff, but also kind of looks at how gender is linked to things like race as well, and that's, you know, that's quite an interesting section of this. It's really lovely, warm, sort of warm style. The people are all feel very, very human in the way that Rhea Ewing draws them. And yeah, as I say, it's these conversations, these interviews, but and so there's a lot of discussion about gender, and as I say, issues around gender and connected to gender, but it's also about Rhea Ewing's realization and kind of coming to terms with and coming out as non-binary or genderqueer. And it also includes a lot of resources for readers who might be questioning their own gender identity, and looks at kind of, you know, sort of navigating the world as someone, you know, outside of, you know, binary norms. I gave this a 5 out of 5. This is excellent. This is a really, really well put together piece. I think it's incredibly useful, as I say, for somebody questioning, but it's even from, you know, I've been transitioning for like 15 years. I've got a gender studies master's degree. I've read a lot around gender and about gender, and I think about gender a lot. Yet there was still plenty in here that, you know, was good for thought, for my own thoughts. Some of the discussions that take place in here between, you know, what are real people, you know, this is real people, real interviews, you know, some of the perspectives of other people, you know, really kind of, you know, made me think about things. Thoroughly recommend this. This has been not only thought-provoking for me, but also inspiring in terms of the way that Rhea Ewing uses the graphic novel form as memoir, and as, you know, kind of how to represent interviews and conversations with others, from my artistic perspective as an artist. This has been really inspiring. So yeah, I thoroughly recommend this one. This one is a 5 out of 5 without a doubt. And then finally, we got to genre fiction by a non-binary or genderqueer author. And for this, I read, or listened to, because it was an audiobook, Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. And this follows the story of a young girl named Jam, who lives in a society where evil monsters has supposedly been eradicated. But her mother paints, her mother's a painter, her mother Bitter is a painter, paints a picture of a creature that then emerges from the painting and claims to have been sent to hunt a monster. So Jam and her friend as well, eventually Redemption, begin to question this idea of utopia that they've been kind of taught is the case, and that they team up to track down this monster, and end up discovering, you know, disturbing truths about the society and people close to them that they thought they knew. It was quite a short one, an audio book, but wow, did this pack a punch. This is a 5 out of 5 and another one of my absolute favourites for the month. But yeah, this is so beautifully written. I mean, this is a young adult novel. It's pitched as a young adult novel. It does explore dark themes. Well, there's child abuse in it. And it explores the idea of, you know, you think you've eradicated monsters and evil, and nobody in the world wants to acknowledge that they might still exist. And nobody wants to speak about it, and nobody, as I say, nobody wants to acknowledge it or think about it. And it's like you put these things in a box and you lock them away, and they become more dangerous because you're not vigilant about it. And as I say, in this, it takes a kid to kind of unlock that box, because the adults don't believe, to start. They don't believe that there's a problem, that there might be a monster in their midst. So yeah, it's it is quite dark. I mean, like Pet, the creature that comes out of the painting. It's quite, you know, it's quite scary. It's quite threatening in some ways. It never threatens Jam, but it's a threatening thing. It looks threatening, and the way it talks is quite threatening. Or, you know, it's big. So it's got some darker themes in it, but it's so well done. I mean, the language is poetic. It's lyrical prose. Some of the descriptions of things are just beautiful, and I'm jealous at Akwaeke Emezi's skill level there, to be able to kind of come up with these things. The characters are so well-rounded, so rich. The story's rich, the character's rich, the writing's rich. Not overly so, and it's, you know, it's as I say, it's short. But it's just one of those that just sucks you in. And as an audiobook, it was narrated by Christopher Myers, who has, I think, possibly one of the most wonderful voices I've ever heard in an audiobook narrator. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. If you haven't read it, I absolutely recommend giving it a go. I have, since reading it, gone and bought another of Akwaeke Emezi's books, and will also be trying Bitter, which is kind of, I think it's a prequel to Pet, I assume about Jam's mum. So that is all of my reading for Trans Girl April. As I say, some absolute belters of books in there, and you know, across this event and Old School April as well, I have had one of the best months of reading I think I have ever had. All of this stuff combined has put me on a real reading roll, and I just want to devour more now. And you know, my wish list is absolutely ballooned in size, because all the stuff I've enjoyed, I'm now looking at, you know, what the authors have also written, and just stuff that's similar as well. So I think that's it from me today. I will be back over the next couple of weeks with some vlogs because I'm away on holiday. So I may not get to my Adventures in Genre wrap up for April until I get back from holiday, which will be kind of around the 3rd week in May. So that may be a little bit late coming this month. So yes, I will be vlogging as I'm away in Scotland, hiking and reading and chilling out. So yes, if you want to see that, please do consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. And if you enjoyed this video, please do consider giving us a like. Thank you very much for watching. And from me, for now, that's ta-ra.